Hello, I want to make this video as a follow-up to the previous video where we used AI for the first time to help us with our coding and to show a common thing that you really have to look out for when you use AI to help you. And it also explains why we didn't get an image in the bottom of our HTML. And the reason why is if I had read this correctly when I was talking, I would not have made this mistake. But the title of what it gave me, what the Copilot AI system gave me, says cleaned up version, and then in parentheses it says snippet. A snippet is a part of the code, like a snip of the code. It's not all of the code. And if I look here at the top of what they give me, it starts with style, and then it ends down here with the last div, which is the rows. It doesn't even include that image part at all. So when I went into my Google Doc, I basically overwrote everything with this, and then it ended up creating this, which is nice, which kind of shows you there's some versatility. You don't necessarily always have to have like the header and the doc type and all that stuff, but you kind of do because of the things that you're going to end up doing with your web page. A lot of things won't work unless you have that stuff. So what I should have done is gone and inserted this into the correct place. So like if I copy this, now let's go back to that Google Doc and make it better. And here's a Google Doc. It's just like it was when I did Control A, Control V. So it's got the text that I put on here. And so I'm going to use my control keys again and just go and click on the document here and do Control Z. And then that should take me back to what it was before. So remembering what the AI gave me, it gave me everything from style down here to the bottom of these boxes. So what I do is I click on style, the beginning of style, okay? Just click there and drag a little bit. Now, without clicking, I'm just scrolling down to the end of where the code snip is, and it ended with this row of these boxes. And now before I click, I'm going to hold down the Shift key and click. And what that does is it selects everything between where I started at style and where I held down the click. So here, this is what I'm going to replace. So now I can do Control V here, and this is going to put the correct stuff in here. Now when I make my web page, it should look just right. Hello, the goal of today's lesson is to learn about what CSS does and how we can use CSS to make our otherwise mundane or kind of lame looking web page into something that is really, really cool. So this is our original web page, and I went ahead and added my Chargers logo back in, and it already does have some CSS. Remember, HTML is the language that creates the structure of the page, where things are, some things about sizes and stuff like that you can do with HTML. CSS, it complements HTML by making the structure look really, really cool. There's also animations you can do with CSS and all sorts of different things that, that take your otherwise, again, bland or kind of boring page, and you can really make it look however you want. You can style something in a way that is very, very different from how other people style things. And the thing about CSS, it's called a library. It's like a digital library. And what it is, it's a vast array of all sorts of different options that you can do with just about everything. You can do different options with how text looks, how inputs look, how drop-downs behave, how buttons look and behave, what happens if you hover over things, how these boxes look, everything. Anything you can have on a web page, you can modify or make more advanced just by adding CSS. So what is CSS? That is the stuff that we include in the style section of our web page. So I already had a little bit of CSS in the original code. This right here, it's called, in the style, it's .box. And then I have these curly brackets, and then everything I put in the curly brackets are the CSS attributes. These are the things that I'm going to make different than they otherwise would be if I didn't include this. So for example, originally, if I had not used this CSS, you wouldn't be able to see these boxes because they would not have had a border. They would have been there in the background, but you wouldn't see them. So I added a border, and this #FF1111, this is like a reddish sort of a color. This is an HTML color code that I did. So the border is 1 pixel, it's solid, and that's the color. I also wanted a margin right on the right side, and margin is like a space between things of 2 pixels. And that way the boxes aren't exactly touching. They're close, but they're not touching. And then I wanted them to be actual boxes, so I made the height and width the same at 150 pixels each. And notice each one of these attributes has what the attribute is, height, width, margin, right, and border, and then a colon, and then whatever the value is, and then the ending part is a semicolon. So the important thing is everything ends with a semicolon, and everything has a colon between the name of the attribute and the value of the attribute. There's a colon here, a colon here, a colon here, and a colon here. So luckily, there's a lot of different places you can get CSS from, and the syntax, remember syntax is like the rules of how things are written or how things are even spelled sometimes. It's very, very important. Like if I were to capitalize the H for height, then it would break the whole thing because the syntax is everything here is lowercase. If I did margin without a dash, right, like space or just all together, it wouldn't work. So the syntax is very important. And sometimes you'll make a mistake because you'll think it should be one thing, but it's actually another. And that's an easy fix because when something doesn't work, you know where to look. It's probably how you spelled something, and you can use all sorts of different libraries and stuff to figure out what the syntax needs to be. So some other places we do have some, well, also, so this is the style, and it says up here dot box. Now, the way that the style actually affects the boxes is by this right here. Dot box is called a class. So when I go down here to these boxes, this row, in fact, let me do this just so it's all in one place. So this row right here, it says div class equals row. So this is a different class, but div class equals box, and class equals box, and class equals box. So all three of these divs, and remember a div is a division of a web page, all three of these divs have the class box, so they are all going to have the attributes that are assigned to that class up here. So when I did dot box, and dot is always in front of whatever the class name is in your style, so you can then add the attributes. So all of these class box things will all have these same attributes, which is a really cool thing. And so the nice thing about CSS is instead of typing everything out, you just type everything out one time, like all the stuff you want, and then you assign the class to whatever you want to have with that class. So that's how it works. Now I could, if I wanted to, right here it says div class equals box, I could do what's called an inline styling. So I could just go style equals, and then in quotes, I could put margin right, and then colon 2 pixels, and then a semicolon, and then all the other stuff. And that would work as well. The problem is if you do that, there's a ton of stuff you're going to end up typing into these lines. It's not going to look good, and you're going to end up typing a lot more than you want to. And that's why we try not to do inline styling if we can avoid it. Sometimes it is unavoidable, but we try not to. So let's make sure this looks good. There we go. So instead, we just have by assigning the class. So let's do this. Let's add a class to this button here. It says button type equals button, click me button. So the way you add a class, notice how this div class equals box, and then it says box, and then it says the closing div. So it's really the same for button. This is the open tag for button, all of that, and this is the closing tag. So anywhere in the open tag, I can add a class. And so I have the type equals button, and now I can just go ahead and add the class like this, class equals, and I can call the class whatever I want. I can even call it button. So I'll just call it button. You probably want to, well, you want to add classes that actually make sense, like something that you would know. I could call the class XYZ, but I wouldn't know what it refers to. Button's probably not overall the best option for a class for button because I'm probably going to have, if I have different buttons, lots of different types of buttons, and I don't want just button. I will probably have like button 1 or button 2 or red button or green button or something that would define which button I'm actually talking about. But for these purposes, we'll just do this. Now, at this point, I'm going to take a sidebar. We've been writing our code on Google Docs. Google Docs is not the best place to write code because obviously we've seen code and it usually is kind of colored and there's indentions and stuff. All Google Docs is a place to like type words. So what we're going to do here is we're going to stop working on this document here, and we're going to move this to what's called a text editor or an HTML editor. An editor is a place where you can type in code, and an editor is designed to receive code, so it knows what it's getting, and then it'll usually color things correctly. It'll often indent things for you. Many editors will even add quotes where you are going to need to have quotes. They might even add a closing tag. So like if I type in like select up here, then it'll automatically make the select closing tag for me. So let's go ahead and move all of this stuff to an editor and then continue working. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click anywhere in my document. I'm going to do Control A. Remember that selects all the text in the document. And then I'm going to select Control C. So now I've copied it. Now I'm going to go find myself a cool editor. All right, now when you search for an editor, you're going to be inclined to say something like, or type in something like HTML editor. I can do this. Watch what happens here. Editor. And I get a bunch of options. Now, remember, not all returns you get on Google are going to be what you hope they would be. And so a lot of these are probably going to be blocked for you. Like this real-time HTML editor, it's even blocked for me as the teacher. So for whatever reason, it's blocked. So some of these things are not what you would expect. Now, this one up here on top, HTML Online Editor, I know that W3 Schools is not blocked for you, but if I click it, it'll work. This is my HTML side, and this is what the output would be. So I could actually go and click in here, do Control A. Nope. Let's just highlight all this stuff and do Control V. Oh, it says try it yourself. We'll try it myself. There we go. So it's actually maybe the best one we've got here. So I've got this right here. Now I can click here and do Control A. That highlights this whole side, and do Control V. That pastes in what I copied earlier. And if I click Run, then I get my output right here. So we're just going to stick with this editor. This should be the top of your list. We're going to stick with this one because it does all of the stuff that we need it to do. Now notice a couple things right off the bat. So we actually have color in everything. This really, really helps us out to figure out what it is we are looking at and what it is that we are doing. And it makes it not everything looks the same. There's definitely some things that other editors do that are better, but we're going to stick with this right now because we're learning how to do all this stuff anyways. So where we left off is we created this class for this button here. That's what we were doing. We were creating a class. So we already made the class button. And you know what? Let's go with my original thing that I told you that we should probably not just call it button. We'll just call this red-button. Now, importantly, any sort of a name that you give anything in coding just about always cannot have a space in it. So I can't do red space button. I can do red underscore button, but a lot of times for my names, for these sorts of things, I just use a dash. I also could put everything together if I wanted to as well, but normally, this is my style. I just put a dash if I'm going to have a name or two words in a name. So red button is the class. I'm going to actually highlight all of red button and do Control C. I did that on purpose because that way I will not misspell it. Spelling errors are going to be the #1 mistake you make, is spelling something wrong. So by highlighting stuff, I'm not going to spell it wrong. So now I can go down to style. So my only other thing, or go up to style. My only other thing in style, which is up here in the header, is my box, dot box, and then I have my curly bracket. I have all the attributes, and then I have my closing curly bracket. When you add a new class to your style, you can put it anywhere. I could put it above box or below box. It doesn't matter. But I cannot put it within the curly brackets of box. So sometimes you'll have something that's got a ton of different attributes, maybe 20. It's a very long list. And if you want to put something after it, you have to find the last curly bracket, the closing curly bracket. And then I'll just click enter a few times to give myself some space. Now I will type in a dot, because that always starts a style in the style area. And then I'm going to do Control V, because remember I already copied red button, and then a space, and then I'm going to do my curly brackets. And I usually type both of them in, and that way I have my closing and my ending. And the reason why I do that is because you will probably forget to type the closing one if you just type the opening curly bracket, and then you're going to say, why doesn't it work? And it's because you didn't have a closing curly bracket. So by typing it in at first, I solved that problem. A lot of editors will just automatically insert that closing curly bracket for you. So for this button, right now it's gray, it says click me, and that's all that it says. So let's just do a couple things. We're going to do background dash color. And here I can actually just name a color if I want to. And it doesn't really matter. I don't have to put a space after the colon, or I can. Either way is totally fine. I'm just going to say red, and then I'm going to do a semicolon. So we're going to make this a red button because it's supposed to be a red button. And then the text is going to be black unless I make the text something else. When we color text, all we type in is color. We don't say like font color or text color or anything like that. We'll say color, colon, and then let's make the text white, like that. And then let's make a border. So we'll say border, colon. And then here we have to say three things: how wide the border is, the type of border, and then the color of the border. So let's go and say border 2 pixels, 2px, then a space, and then the type, we'll just do solid, and then a space, and the color, let's use the color magenta, which is kind of a reddish color, and then I'll use a semicolon there. Now, what's cool about using an editor is that as I'm typing, instead of downloading it and all that stuff and seeing what it looks like, I can just click run, and I can see what it looks like. And it looks like I did something wrong, so I've got to figure that out. And I'm actually glad that happened, because what I realized, or what I determined, was that when we use docs, in our doc, it didn't always give us a quote. It gave us what's called a curly quote. And so they look a little bit different. I've already fixed my curly quote here, but a curly quote is not what we want. A curly quote is not readable by an editor, which is another reason why we don't really want to use docs to do any of our programming. We only use docs just to get started, but we're on an editor now. So I fixed these quotes. Now these quotes are correct. So the quotes around class, when we put them in originally a few minutes ago in our doc, they were the curly quotes, and they look a little bit different than these quotes. So now I can click the run button here, and there we go. See, I've got a nice red button right there. And so that's applying a class to the button. I can apply a class to whatever I want. And of course, I can also do, and I think I mentioned this earlier, some what we call inline styling. And sometimes that is handy. Like I have this picture of the Chargers logo. Let's say that I wanted this just to be smaller. I could definitely assign a class to the image and then go up to classes up here in my style and then do something and change how that looks. I could do that, of course. But if I just have one image and I just want to change a little bit about it, then all I really have to do, and images are weird because they don't have a closing tag, it's just one tag. But as long as I'm not like within the quotes of something else, all I have to do is just add the styling in here. So let's go and do that. So I'm going to make this image a little bit smaller. So after my last quote on Alt, I just put my cursor there. I'm going to type the word style, colon, oh no, style equals. And then I have my quotes. And again, I do 2 quotes, and then I go back to work in between the quotes, and that way I make sure I do that closing quote. Otherwise, I might forget. So style equals, and then within the quotes, I'm going to say width, colon, and then 100px, semicolon. And then I can make a space here. I don't have to make a space. Sometimes I like to because it's easier to read. And then I'm going to say height, colon, 100px, semicolon. And this may not look good. So the nice thing about an editor, I can see if styling this like in a square is going to look good or not. Let's figure it out. That looks fine. And it's smaller as well. And I could even add a border to it if I wanted to. Let's make a little border. So after this colon, after the semicolon for height, I can say border, colon, 1px, space, solid, space, and blue, because it's the Chargers. And then a semicolon. And then if I run that, it's going to have a little border around it. So this is how CSS works, and we could go and do this all day long. Now, there are CSS libraries that you can Google, like list of CSS attributes, and there's hundreds of thousands of them. There's all sorts of things that you can do with CSS. There's so many that not even the best programmers know them all, because people are literally adding to this library all the time. So to remember them all is impossible. Now, remember how we used Copilot earlier to help us figure out what was wrong with our code in the first place? We're going to use Copilot again, and this is going to be for a little creativity. And sometimes I'll do this if I'm kind of not really understanding what do I want my page to look like or my web application to look like, and I just want to be creative. Then I'll use Copilot to help me with that process. Before I do this, I'll also remind that one of the things that's true about CSS or coding in general is really, if you can imagine it, it can probably be done. Most likely it can be done. So in terms of styling, in terms of like how things will respond and react, and you could put a glow behind things, you could make things get bigger or smaller, and you hover over them. You can do all sorts of interesting, neat things to your page. You can center things, you name it, you can do it. So we're going to consider that, but we're going to give our Copilot a very open-ended set of directions. So let's go over to Copilot, and then I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so I've got Copilot open over here. Here's my HTML with the CSS that I added, and my output here, and this is on the W3 Schools editor that we've been using. So in Copilot, I'm going to say, well, first let's do this. Let's click anywhere in where we've been editing. Hit Control A and Control C. Now I've copied all of this HTML, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to say, make my web page the coolest, most awesomest web page possible. Add some animations and anything else that might make my page the best ever. Now, you do not have to type in everything I typed in. What I find with AI is when you add these descriptive things like coolest or most awesomest or best ever, or whatever you're going to add, it's going to give you responses that are lined up with that. What you really want is a lot of pizzazz on your output. So don't just say, change my HTML to make it look better. What does that even mean? That might make it look more business-like. Who knows? So this is what I typed in. I want you to type in something that's similar-ish that would maybe speak more to you. You might like purple. You might say that has a purple theme or something like that. Something that's creative to you, okay? And then I'm going to say this is very important. Add my name to the title, and then I'm going to do colon Michael Anderson, like that. That way my name's going to be on it as well. And then this is very, very important to add this, because remember earlier we got the code snip that we had to add in. That's fine, and it's not hard to do, but sometimes you're going to get a bunch of code snips, like 4 code snips, and you got to remember and figure out where do we actually put them in our code. So if you ask nicely, then the AI will give this to you. I'm going to say, please return the full HTML code. So now it's going to basically give me the whole code. I can just paste it back into my editor. So I'm going to click Shift and then Enter just to give me a few spaces between my question and then, or my command, I guess, and then the code. Now I've already copied the code from over here. I did Control A, Control C. So I'll just do Control V, and I'm going to click the little thing here, and then we're going to see what it gives me. So it says it's giving me some animations, some gradients, hover effects, and what's important is that I let it work. So sometimes kids will say, do it, and then they'll try to copy it right away. It takes a little bit of time, and sometimes the AI is going to think for a bit. But notice all of the different CSS. It added CSS to the body, to the H2, to the labels, like the select label, the input label. These are all the different labels. It added CSS to everything. And some of this stuff you'll probably be able to figure out what it means. We're not going to go over any of it right now, but we will later on. And some of it you may be like, I have no idea. But all we really care about is that it should have done what we asked it to do. We're going to click Copy, go over back to our editor, and then I clicked on it, so now I've got to do Control A. Now that highlights everything selectable, so all I have to do is click Control V. That's my new code, my my upgraded code. And if I click run, then I get basically everything. Welcome to Michael Anderson's epic web page. And I have some little hover. Look at that. It's like shaky hover effects here. My image kind of like whoop, whoop, moves like that when I do that. So I can click. So all these different things happen. These options look kind of neat. I don't know what happened to the text. Looks fine. So I could probably make this do even more things, but this is cool. This is actually right. So now what you're going to do is you're going to take a screenshot that includes your name and your awesome web page, and you're going to paste that in to the turn-in slide that is shared with you on your shared drive, and then you will be done for the day and you'll be ready to go for tomorrow. So good job.